Katie Murphy walked through the silver corridors of the Galactic Defense Academy, with her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The space station orbited around the moon Kepler 442c, and served as a training ground for different alien species, who wanted to work together. Katie had been a Marine back on Earth for 6 years, before getting this job as a survival instructor. She was used to teaching humans how to stay alive in dangerous places, but today would be different. Commander Lisa Price waited for Katie in the main briefing room. The older woman had gray hair and serious eyes that had seen many battles across the galaxy. Lisa looked up from her digital tablet when Katie entered the room. Commander Price spoke in a calm voice. "Katie, you have a new assignment. We are starting the first mixed-species female combat unit. You will train 3 alien recruits in basic survival skills." Katie sat down across from her commander. She had trained soldiers before, but never aliens from different worlds. The idea excited her more than it worried her. She had always been good at adapting to new situations. The first recruit is Zara Vel Nash from the crystal world of Luminous. Her people look like what humans call elves, with long pointed ears and pale skin that seems to glow. They can control energy with their minds and live in beautiful crystal cities. They think humans are primitive because Earth has so many dangerous animals and harsh weather. Katie nodded and tried to picture what this Zara might be like. She had read about the Luminous people in her training materials. They lived peaceful lives in their crystal cities where everything was controlled and safe. The second recruit is Crix TA from the hive world of Chictal. She looks like a large insect that walks on 2 legs. Her people work together like a giant brain with many bodies. They are very good at planning and fighting, but Crix TA will be alone for the first time in her life. This might be hard for her. Katie thought about how strange it would be to never make a decision by yourself. On Earth, people learned to think for themselves from the time they were children. The third recruit is Nissa, from the ocean planet Tidal Mora. She breathes both air and water, and her skin is blue-green like the sea. Her people are excellent fighters underwater, but they have never needed to survive on dry land for long periods. Commander Price put down her tablet and looked directly at Katie. These 3 aliens come from worlds where survival is very different from Earth. What you consider basic training might seem impossible to them. Remember that humans are unusual in the galaxy because we come from such a dangerous world. Katie smiled and felt confident about the challenge ahead. She had grown up in Montana, where bears and mountain lions were common. Her father had taught her to camp and hunt when she was just 8 years old. To her, these skills were as natural as breathing. "When do I meet them?" Katie asked. "In 1 hour. They are waiting in Training Bay 7. Commander Price stood up and walked toward the door. Then she turned back to Katie. "Be patient with them. Their worlds have made them strong in different ways, but they have never faced the kind of dangers that humans deal with every day." Katie left the briefing room and walked toward the training bay. She passed windows that showed the dark space around them with distant stars shining like tiny diamonds. She thought about the alien recruits and wondered what they would think of human training methods. When Katie reached Training Bay 7, she found 3 very different-looking females waiting for her. Zara Vel Nash stood near the far wall with her arms crossed. She was tall and thin with silver hair that seemed to move by itself. Her skin had a soft white glow, and her large purple eyes watched Katie with suspicion. Krix. TA stood in the center of the room, moving her head from side to side in a pattern that reminded Katie of a scanning motion. She was shorter than Zara, but much wider, with a dark green shell covering her body. Her forearms moved constantly, and her large compound eyes reflected the room lights. Nissa sat on a chair near the door, with her webbed hands folded in her lap. Her blue-green skin had a wet appearance, and small gills on her neck opened and closed slowly. She looked uncomfortable being so far from water. Katie walked to the middle of the room and smiled at all 3 aliens. "Hello everyone, I am Katie Murphy and I will be your survival instructor. We are going to start with some basic wilderness training. Zaravel Nash spoke first with a voice that sounded like wind chimes. Basic training on your world killed more of your species than most. Wars kill ours. We have heard stories about Earth animals that hunt humans for food. Crix TA made clicking sounds before speaking in a mechanical voice. My people have analyzed human survival rates on Earth. The statistics are concerning. How do you expect us to survive what kills your own kind? Nisa spoke softly, with a voice that bubbled like water. My world has dangerous creatures in the deep ocean, but they stay away from populated areas. Earth animals seem to attack anywhere at any time. Katie realized that these aliens had heard stories about Earth that made it sound like a death world where humans barely survived each day. She tried to think of a way to explain that most humans lived normal, safe lives. Do not worry, Katie said with a cheerful voice. We will start with something simple. Just basic forest survival with some common Earth animals. Nothing too challenging for your first day. The three aliens looked at each other with expressions that Katie was learning to read as worry and fear. She wondered why they seemed so nervous about what she considered elementary training. Unearthed children went camping with their families all the time. Zara, Vel, Nash glowed brighter, which Katie guessed meant she was stressed. When you say common Earth animals, do you mean the creatures that weigh more than our entire combat vehicles? Katie laughed and shook her head. No. We will start with something much smaller. Maybe a bear or some wolves. Very manageable stuff. All three aliens became very still and quiet. Katie noticed that Crix TA had stopped her constant scanning motion, and Nissa had gripped the sides of her chair. Even Zara had stopped glowing and now looked pale. Katie began to understand that what humans called basic training might seem impossible to species from safer worlds. She would need to be more careful about how she explained things to her new students. Katie led the three alien recruits down a long hallway toward the advanced training facility. The holographic simulation room could create any environment from any planet in the galaxy. Katie had used it many times to recreate Earth forests and mountains for her own practice sessions. Zaravel Nash walked behind Katie with careful steps. Her energy sensing abilities were picking up the powerful technology in the walls around them. The machines here could create things that felt completely real, including smells, sounds, and even temperature changes. Crix TA moved with quick, jerky motions that showed her nervousness. Her people had advanced technology, but they preferred controlled environments where everything could be predicted and planned. The idea of facing unpredictable wild animals made her compound eyes dart in all directions. Nissa walked slowly because her legs were not built for long distances on dry ground. Her gills worked harder in the recycled air of the space station. She missed the feeling of water flowing over her skin and the safety of her underwater cities. Katie stopped at a large metal door with warning signs written in multiple alien languages. She placed her hand on a scanner, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a huge, empty room with silver walls and a ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever. This is where we will practice, Katie announced as she walked to a control panel covered with buttons and displays. I am going to create a nice Earth forest for us. Nothing too complicated, just some trees and basic wildlife. The three aliens stood close together near the door as if they might need to run away quickly. Katie began pressing buttons on the control panel without seeming to worry about what she was creating. Katie, do you think this is wise? Zara asked with her musical voice. Perhaps we should start with something less dangerous, like your desert regions. Katie laughed while continuing to work with the controls. Deserts are much more dangerous than forests. No water, extreme heat, poisonous snakes, and very little food. Forests are much friendlier places. Crix TA made rapid clicking sounds, which meant she was thinking very fast. Her hive mind had never prepared individual units for survival without constant communication with the group. She did not know how to make decisions when she could not hear the thoughts of millions of her sisters. The simulation began to activate, with a low humming sound that filled the air. The silver walls started to shimmer and change color. Green grass appeared on the floor, growing taller until it reached their knees. Large brown tree trunks materialized around them, with thick branches stretching overhead. Nissa took a step backward. When she heard the sound of running water somewhere in the distance, on her world water sounds meant safety, but here they seemed to come from an unknown source that could hide predators. The ceiling above them changed to look like a blue sky with white clouds drifting slowly across it. Sunlight filtered down through the tree leaves, creating moving patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Birds began singing in the trees with complex melodies that seemed to come from everywhere. At once, Katie breathed deeply and smiled at the familiar smells of pine trees and rich earth. This reminds me of the forests near my home in Montana. My father used to take me camping here when I was a little girl. Zara Nash used her energy-sensing abilities to examine their surroundings. Everything felt real to her senses, but she could detect the artificial nature of the simulation. Still, her people had never created anything this complex or detailed. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound came from deeper in the forest. Something large was moving through the trees and breaking branches as it walked. The three aliens moved closer, together, while Katie stood calmly with her hands on her hips. "Perfect," Katie said with obvious pleasure. "Our first lesson is approaching right on schedule." A massive brown shape emerged from between the trees, walking on 4 powerful legs. The creature stood over 8 feet tall at the shoulder, and weighed more than all 4 females combined. Its small dark eyes looked around the forest while its large nose sniffed the air. Ta immediately switched to combat mode and raised all 4 of her arms into fighting positions. Her people had been warriors for thousands of years, but they had never faced anything this large without the support of their hive mind. Nissa froze completely when she saw the massive animal. Her people fought creatures in the deep ocean, but they used the water to move quickly and hide. Here on dry land she felt slow and helpless. Zaravel Nash began to glow brighter as her energy abilities activated automatically. Her people used energy manipulation to defend themselves, but this creature did not register as a threat to her senses. It seemed to be just a normal animal going about its daily business. Katie stepped forward toward the huge bear, without showing any fear. She spoke in a calm, quiet voice, while watching the animal's movements carefully. "This is a brown bear," Katie explained to her terrified students. "They are common in North American forests, and usually avoid humans. The key to dealing with bears is understanding their behavior and responding correctly." The bear lifted its massive head and looked directly at the group of females. Its nose twitched as it tried to identify their scents. Katie remained perfectly still while continuing to speak in her calm voice. "Bears have excellent hearing and smell, but poor eyesight. This one is trying to figure out what we are and whether we pose a threat. The worst thing we could do right now is run, because that would trigger its chase instinct." Crix TA wanted to attack the massive creature before it could attack them, but something in Katie's confident tone made her hesitate. Her tactical training told her to strike first, but Katie seemed to have a different plan. Nissa wished desperately for water, where she could swim away from this enormous predator. On her world, large creatures stayed in the deepest parts of the ocean, where smaller beings never went. Zaravel Nash tried to use her energy abilities to communicate with the bear, but it did not respond to her mental touch. The creature seemed to operate on instincts that were completely foreign to her peaceful people. Katie slowly raised her arms above her head to make herself appear larger. She began speaking to the bear in a firm but not aggressive voice. She did not shout, but made sure her voice carried clearly through the forest. "Hey bear, we are just passing through your territory. We do not want any trouble, and we are not a threat to you or your cubs." The massive animal tilted its head and seemed to consider Katie's words. After a long moment, it huffed through its large nose and turned to walk away. The sound of its heavy footsteps faded as it disappeared deeper into the forest. Katie turned back to her students with a satisfied smile. See, that was not so difficult. Bears are actually quite reasonable animals, if you know how to communicate with them properly. The three aliens stared at Katie with expressions of complete amazement. What she had just done seemed impossible to creatures from worlds where such large predators did not exist. Katie walked deeper into the simulated forest, while her three alien students followed at a safe distance. The bear encounter had shaken them more than she expected, and she realized she needed to change her teaching approach. These beings came from worlds where survival meant something completely different. Zara Nash kept her energy senses active, scanning for any other large creatures that might be hiding nearby. Her people lived in crystal cities, where the most dangerous thing was accidentally walking into a wall. The idea that massive predators roamed freely through Earth forests seemed like madness to her. Crixta moved in short, rapid bursts from tree to tree, using her forearms to maintain balance. Her hive mind training had taught her to work with thousands of other warriors, but here she had to make every decision alone. The isolation felt more frightening than the bear had been. Nissa struggled to keep up on her webbed feet, which were designed for swimming rather than walking on uneven ground. She kept looking around for sources of water, where she could retreat if another dangerous animal appeared. Katie stopped at a small clearing, where sunlight filtered down through the tree canopy. She sat on a fallen log and gestured for the aliens to join her. The simulation had been running for 30 minutes, and she could see that her students were exhausted from the constant stress. Let me explain something about Earth animals, Katie began in a gentle voice. Most of them do not want to fight humans. They have their own lives and problems to worry about. Bears eat fishberries and roots most of the time. They only become dangerous if they feel threatened, or if they are protecting their cubs. Zara sat carefully on the grass, keeping her glowing skin dim so she would not attract attention from any hidden predators. On Luminous we have small creatures that eat plants but nothing larger than a house cat. How do humans manage to survive childhood with such monsters everywhere? Katie smiled and tried to think of a way to explain human development that would make sense to aliens. Human children do not encounter bears very often. We live in cities and towns where dangerous animals cannot go. When we do go into the wilderness, we learn safety rules and travel in groups. Crixta made clicking sounds as she processed this information. So your young are trained in combat from an early age to prepare them for these encounters. Not combat exactly, Katie replied. We teach children to avoid dangerous situations and what to do if they cannot avoid them. Most humans never see a wild bear in their entire lives. Then why do you know so much about bear behavior? Nissa asked, while adjusting her position to keep her gills moist. Katie thought about her childhood in Montana, where her father had taught her to hunt in camp. My family lived in a rural area, where encounters with wildlife were more common. My father was a forest ranger, and he taught me how to read animal behavior and respond appropriately. Suddenly, the peaceful forest sounds changed. The birds stopped singing, and a tense silence fell over the clearing. Katie immediately became alert and stood up from the log. She held up one hand to signal the aliens to stay quiet. Something else is coming, Katie whispered. Listen carefully, and do not move unless I tell you to. A low growling sound came from the trees around them. It was different from the bear, much higher pitched and more threatening. Crixta tried to locate the source, but the sound seemed to come from multiple directions at once. Wolves, Katie said quietly. They hunt in packs, and they are much more dangerous than bears, because they work together. Stay close to me, and do not run no matter what happens. Yellow eyes appeared between the trees, as gray shapes moved through the shadows. The wolves circled the clearing with practiced coordination that reminded Crixta of her own military training. She counted at least 6 animals, each one smaller than the bear, but working as a team. Zara Nash began to panic as her energy senses detected the predatory intent of the pack. These creatures were hunting, and they had identified the group as potential prey. Her people had no experience with being hunted by intelligent predators. Nissa wanted to climb a tree, but her aquatic body was not built for climbing. She looked around desperately for water, but the small stream she had heard earlier was too far away. Katie picked up a large stick from the ground and held it like a weapon. She began speaking in a loud, firm voice while making herself appear as large as possible. "We are not easy prey," she announced to the wolves. "We will fight back, and some of you will be hurt. Find easier food somewhere else." The largest wolf stepped into the clearing and stared directly at Katie. Its lips pulled back to show long white teeth, and it made a low rumbling sound that was clearly a threat. Krixta suddenly understood that this was exactly like the tactical situations her people trained for. The wolves were using pack coordination to surround and intimidate their prey. She began to move in patterns that would make the group harder to attack. "Follow my movements, Krix," Ta told the others. "Create a defensive formation with our backs together. Make it difficult for them to isolate one of us." Katie was surprised too. Hear tactical advice from the insect warrior, but she immediately saw the wisdom in it. The aliens were beginning to adapt their unique abilities to Earth's survival situations. Zara Velnash realized that her energy manipulation could be used for more than communication. She began creating bright flashes of light that confused the wolves and made it harder for them to coordinate their attack. Nissa discovered that her powerful leg muscles, designed for swimming, could also be used for powerful kicks on land. She positioned herself where she could strike at any wolf that came too close. The wolf pack leaders seemed confused by the organized resistance. These creatures did not behave like normal prey animals. They worked together and showed no signs of panic or flight response. Katie raised her stick above her head and let out a loud shout that echoed through the forest. The combination of noise, light, and coordinated movement finally convinced the wolves to look for easier prey elsewhere. The pack faded back into the trees as quietly as they had appeared. The forest sounds gradually returned to normal as birds began singing again. Katie turned to look at her alien students with genuine pride. "You did exactly the right things. Krixta, your tactical thinking saved us. Zara, your light display disrupted their coordination. Nissa, your defensive positioning protected our weak spots." The three aliens looked at each other with new understanding. They had survived an encounter with Earth predators by combining their natural abilities with human survival knowledge. "Is this really what you call basic training?" Zara asked, with amazement in her voice. Katie nodded casually. "This is level 1 stuff. Wait until you see what we do in the advanced courses." Katie watched her three alien students as they caught their breath after the wolf encounter. She could see that something had changed in their attitudes. They were no longer just terrified visitors from safer worlds. They were beginning to understand how to survive in dangerous places. The forest simulation continued around them, with realistic sounds and smells that made everything feel completely real. Katie decided it was time to introduce the next phase of their training while the aliens were feeling more confident. "All right, team," Katie announced with her usual cheerful voice. "You handled that wolf pack very well. I think you are ready for phase 2 of basic training." Zaravel Nash stopped glowing and looked at Katie with suspicion. "What exactly does phase 2 involve on your death world?" Katie laughed and shook her head. "Earth is not a death world. It just has more variety than most planets. Phase 2 means we practice dealing with multiple types of challenges at the same time." Krixta made rapid clicking sounds as she tried to process this information. Her tactical mind was beginning to understand that Earth's survival required constant adaptation to changing situations. Katie walked back to the control panel that was hidden behind a large tree. She pressed several buttons, and the forest around them began to change. The temperature dropped, and dark clouds appeared overhead, blocking out the warm sunlight. "Now we have weather to deal with." Katie explained as the first drops of rain began to fall. Rain makes everything more difficult. The ground becomes slippery. Animals behave differently, and it is harder to see and hear what is happening around you. Nissa actually felt better when the rain started because it helped keep her gills moist. Her people were used to wet environments, but she quickly realized that rain on land created different problems than water in the ocean. The sound of breaking branches came from 3 different directions as new creatures entered the simulation. Katie nodded with satisfaction as she recognized the sounds of approaching predators. A mountain lion emerged from the trees to their left, moving with fluid grace that reminded Zara of dancers from her home world. But this creature was clearly a predator with golden eyes that tracked every movement of the group. From their right came the sound of heavy breathing and grunting. A massive wild boar crashed through the underbrush with curved tusks that could tear through metal. Its small, angry eyes focused on the group as it pawed the ground with sharp hooves. Behind them, the wolves returned, but this time there were more of them. Katie counted at least 10 gray shapes moving through the trees with coordinated precision. Crix TA immediately began analyzing the tactical situation. Multiple predators from different directions, with varying attack patterns and capabilities. Her hive mind training had prepared her for complex battle scenarios, but never with creatures that fought on pure instinct. "This is impossible," Zara said as her energy senses detected the hostile intent coming from all directions. No species could survive regular encounters with this many predators. Katie remained calm as she studied the positions of all the animals. This is actually a fairly common situation in some Earth environments. The key is understanding that each predator has different motivations and weaknesses. The mountain lion moved first, flowing like liquid gold as it approached from the side. Katie immediately recognized its hunting pattern and called out instructions to her team. Mountain lions are ambush predators. They want to isolate one target and attack from behind. Stay together and face it directly. It will not attack if it cannot surprise us. Nissa used her powerful legs to kick mud and debris toward the big cat. The unexpected projectiles startled the predator and forced it to retreat several steps. The wild boar charged forward with its head down and tusks aimed at the group. Crix TA recognized this as a direct assault tactic and responded with movements designed to redirect the attack. "Boars, charge in straight lines," Crix TA called out as she guided the group to step aside at the last moment. The massive animal thundered past them and crashed into a tree. Zaravel Nash discovered that her energy manipulation could be used to create sounds as well as lights. She began generating noise that confused the wolf pack and disrupted their coordination. The rain made everything more difficult as the ground became muddy and slippery. Katie found herself impressed by how quickly her alien students adapted their abilities to the changing conditions. Katie picked up several rocks from the ground and threw them at the mountain lion whenever it tried to circle behind the group. Her aim was accurate enough to discourage the predator without seriously injuring it. "Work together," Katie shouted over the sound of rain and animal growls. "Each of you has abilities that can solve part of this problem. Combine your strengths too. Handle what none of you could face alone." Crix TA began directing the movements of the group like a battlefield commander. Her tactical knowledge helped them maintain defensive positions while avoiding the charges of the wild boar. Zara used her energy abilities to create a barrier of light and sound that kept the wolves at a distance. The predators seemed confused by the artificial sensory input and could not coordinate their attack. Nissa discovered that her swimming muscles gave her excellent balance on the slippery ground. She became the anchor point for the group, helping the others maintain their footing. The 3 predator species began to interfere with each other as they competed for access to the same prey. The mountain lion hissed at the wolves when they came too close to its hunting ground. The wild boar charged at anything that moved, including the other predators. Katie realized that her students were no longer following her instructions. They were thinking for themselves and using their unique abilities in creative ways. This was exactly what she had hoped to achieve. The mountain lion finally decided that this prey was too much trouble and disappeared back into the forest. The wild boar became confused by all the noise and lights and wandered away looking for easier food. The wolves retreated when they realized their pack coordination had been disrupted. As the last predator disappeared, the rain stopped and sunlight broke through the clouds again. The forest returned to its peaceful state, with birds singing in the trees. Katie looked at her 3 alien students with genuine pride. You just survived a complex multi-predator scenario in adverse weather conditions. Most human survival experts would be impressed by what you accomplished. Crix TA straightened her posture with obvious satisfaction. The tactical challenge was significant but manageable when approached systematically. Zara Velnash had stopped glowing completely and now seemed relaxed in the Earth forest environment. I am beginning to understand why humans are considered such effective warriors throughout the galaxy. Nissa flexed her powerful legs and smiled with her wide mouth. My people will not believe that I survived on dry land for this long. Katie walked over to the control panel and began shutting down the simulation. The forest faded away, leaving them standing in the silver training room again. So what do you think? Katie asked, as the walls returned to their normal metallic appearance. Are you ready for tomorrow when we practice winter mountain survival? All 3 aliens stared at Katie with expressions that mixed amazement with terror. They were beginning to realize that what humans called basic training was just the beginning of an incredible journey. 3 months had passed since Katie Murphy first met her alien students in Training Bay 7. The Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with excitement as graduation day approached for the first mixed-species female combat unit. Katie stood in her dress uniform looking out at the viewing deck where representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered to witness the ceremony. Zara Velnash walked up beside Katie, wearing the silver insignia of a certified survival specialist. Her people had sent a delegation from Luminous to see what their daughter had accomplished on the notorious Death World training program. I never thought I would say this, but I will miss the constant danger, Katie said with a smile. My people are already asking me to teach Earth's survival techniques to our military units. Crix TA approached with her 4 arms moving in coordinated patterns that showed her confidence. The hive mind warrior had learned to make independent decisions while still maintaining contact with her home world. The tactical applications of Earth survival training are remarkable, Crix Ta announced in her mechanical voice. My sisters want to study human adaptation techniques for incorporation into hive doctrine. Nissa came over from the water tank, where she had been preparing her gills for the ceremony. Her blue-green skin gleamed with health, and her movements on dry land were now smooth and confident. The ocean cities of Tidal Mora are requesting cultural exchange programs with Earth, Nissa reported. They want to learn how humans developed such effective land-based survival skills. Katie felt proud of how far her students had progressed. They had started as terrified aliens who thought Earth was impossibly dangerous. Now they were certified instructors who could teach survival skills to their own people. Commander Lisa Price entered the preparation area, wearing her formal uniform with all the medals from her long military career. She looked at the 4 females with obvious satisfaction. The graduation ceremony will begin in 30 minutes, Commander Price announced. Representatives from over 40 worlds are here to see what you have accomplished. This program has exceeded every expectation we had. Katie had been promoted to head the new Xenological Survival Training Program. Her success with the first mixed species unit had convinced the Galactic Defense Academy to expand the program to include students from across the known galaxy. What started as basic Earth survival training had become something much larger. Each alien species brought their own unique abilities and perspectives to the program. The combination created new techniques that no single species could have developed alone. The four females walked together toward the main auditorium where the graduation ceremony would take place. Katie remembered how terrified her students had been during their first encounter with the holographic bear. Now they could handle winter mountain survival extreme, desert conditions, and even underwater cave systems. The auditorium was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Katie saw crystal entities from Luminous, insect warriors from Chictal, and aquatic delegates from Tidal Mora. There were also species she had never seen before, who had come to learn about the legendary human training methods. Commander Price walked to the podium and began speaking to the assembled crowd. 3 months ago, we started an experiment. We wanted to see if different species could learn from each other and create new approaches to survival and combat training. Katie watched as her 3 students stood at attention with their heads held high. They had earned the respect of every being in the auditorium through their determination and courage. The human instructor, Katie Murphy, has proven that Earth's survival techniques can be adapted for use by any species. Her students have not only mastered these skills, but have contributed their own unique abilities to create hybrid training methods. Zara Velnash stepped forward when her name was called. She had developed techniques for using energy manipulation in wilderness survival that were now being taught throughout the galaxy. Crix Atier received recognition for creating new tactical doctrines that combined human adaptability with hive mind coordination. Her methods were already being studied by military academies on dozens of worlds. Nissa was honored for developing amphibious survival techniques that allowed land-based species to operate effectively in aquatic environments. Katie was called to the podium to receive her promotion and commendation. As she walked across the stage, she thought about all the challenges they had overcome together. The program you see here today will continue to grow, Commander Price announced. We now have requests from over 100 worlds to send students to learn Earth survival techniques. What began as basic training has become a new model for interspecies cooperation. After the ceremony, Katie and her former students gathered in a quiet corner of the reception area. They had become more than instructor and students. They were friends who had shared dangerous experiences and learned to trust each other completely. So what happens next? Zara asked, as she accepted congratulations from a group of crystal beings who could hardly believe what their representative had accomplished. Katie smiled as she watched new groups of alien recruits arriving for the next training cycle. Tomorrow I start working with 12 new species, including some that have never left their home systems before. The program is expanding faster than we ever imagined. Crix TA made happy clicking sounds as she communicated with her hive mind. My sisters are sending 50 volunteers for the next advanced program. They want to learn human techniques for individual decision-making in survival situations. Nissa was surrounded by aquatic beings who were fascinated by her stories of surviving on dry land for extended periods. Her people were already planning to build training facilities that could simulate Earth environments. Underwater, Katie looked around the reception area and saw the future of interspecies cooperation. Beings who had never imagined working together were now planning joint training exercises and cultural exchanges. A young alien approached Katie with obvious nervousness. She looked like a bird-human hybrid with colorful feathers and large eyes that blinked frequently. Instructor Murphy, I am Kira, from the wind world of Ether. I have heard stories about your training methods. Is it true that you make students face creatures that could actually kill them? Katie laughed and remembered asking similar questions. When she first learned about the program, we use very realistic simulations, but safety is always our first priority. The goal is to teach you to survive in dangerous situations, not to actually put you in danger. But the stories say that Earth animals are larger than our spacecraft and hunt in coordinated packs. Katie looked at her 3 former students, who were now grinning at the familiar questions. They remembered being just as terrified when they first arrived. The animals are challenging, Katie admitted, but they are just animals. With proper knowledge and techniques, any intelligent being can learn to coexist with them safely. My students here are proof of that. Zaravel Nash walked over and put a glowing hand on Kira's feathered shoulder. 3 months ago I thought humans were barely civilized savages who lived in constant terror. Now I understand that they are the most adaptable species in the galaxy. You will be amazed by what you can accomplish. Katie watched as more new students arrived for orientation. Each group brought different abilities and perspectives that would add to the growing collection of survival techniques. The program had started as a simple attempt to teach Earth survival skills to aliens. It had evolved into something that was changing how species throughout the galaxy thought about cooperation and adaptation. Katie Murphy had gone from being a survival instructor to becoming an ambassador for human capabilities. Her casual mention of Level 1 training had become legendary throughout known space. As the reception continued, Katie thought about the future. There would be new challenges and new species to work with. But she had learned that with patience, understanding, and good humor, almost any obstacle could be overcome. The legend of the human instructor, who made impossible things seem routine, was just beginning to spread across the galaxy.